Welcome back to the channel. The Biden-Harris administration just announced that Medicare is negotiating prices for 10 best-selling pharmaceutical drugs. And because of that negotiation, we're going to save $6 billion. That's what they'd have you believe. We're going to save $6 billion. And indeed, the drugs that we're negotiating price for, Eliquis, Jardiance, Xarelto, Januvia, Entresto, the list goes on. These are best-selling drugs, and they have high sticker prices. They're all branded pharmaceutical drugs without clear generic alternatives. And by negotiating price, they're going to lower the price Medicare pays a little bit. They estimate it's going to lead to $6 billion a year in savings and $1.5 billion in out-of-pocket savings. But the problem is, and this relates to so many things that we discuss in health policy, that you don't actually save money when you pay for things that don't work at all. So let's unpack this a little bit. Let's talk about how they may be plus $6 billion here, but they're minus $10 billion, maybe $20 billion overall because of their bad policies. All right, let's get into it. Number one, Entresto. Entresto is one of the drugs that they're saving all this money on. They're going to lower the price of Entresto. Entresto is sacubitril, a novel branded drug, plus valsartan, and it was tested in a randomized controlled trial called Paradigm HF against enalapril. Enalapril was dosed in that study 10 milligrams BID, which is the half maximal US FDA dosing. The valsartan that was studied in Paradigm was 160 milligrams BID, which is the maximum US FDA dosing, and a dose so hefty, I get dizzy just thinking about it. I mean, you will faint if you give this dose to most people, and they'll faint, and it will be a disaster. And in fact, Entresto has only been validated at the dose in the trial. It's not been validated at the dose it's being prescribed for the vast majority of people who take it, who don't take the maximum 97-103 package dose. They take something less. Where is the evidence that these lower doses are better than either an ACE or an ARB if you're intolerant to ACE inhibitors? The answer is there is none. So you can save all the money you want by lowering the price of Entresto, but it's still more expensive than generic valsartan, than other ARBs, and more expensive than ACE inhibitors. And we have no idea if the prescribing of this drug is actually making things better off. In fact, we do have data that the death rate from heart failure is actually getting worse over the last decade, ever since we've embraced this dogma of goal-directed therapy, which, by the way, administers homeopathic doses of these drugs, not the doses actually studied in the trial, to lots of people, rather than just picking one or two of those drugs and maximizing the dose and maximizing the benefit. So the Biden administration is saving money, but you know what would have really saved money is if back in the day, back in the, I believe, Obama administration, when Entresto was approved, they'd actually demanded a confirmatory randomized controlled trial in 2014. That would have actually saved money, because I suspect that Entresto just don't work. It just don't work the way it's given. One clue is that in post-MI, it doesn't work. It's a very unique drug. It works in reduced ejection fraction. It failed in preserved ejection fraction. It works in reduced ejection fraction in one study, but it don't work post-MI. That's a unique drug. That's just one example. I got into a little bit of the weeds. You can read, or you can check out my other video on Entresto and see many of my talks on the topic. But this is a problem that plagues them. One is they're lowering the price of drugs that probably are no better than cheap generic alternatives. Number two, they're simultaneously approving drugs based on no evidence at all. The administration spent $10 billion on Paxlovid. Paxlovid was only validated in people who did not previously have COVID, who did not get vaccinated, and who got an older strain of COVID-19. In those people, you reduce hospitalizations. In people who've had COVID-19, in people who've been vaccinated, the EPIC-SR study is more salient. It is a negative study. There's no benefit. In fact, we're going to get the UK panoramic study, but very likely Paxlovid, $10 billion of spending, is being spent on purposes that have no clear benefit. Young people, people who are vaccinated, people who are boosted, where there is no benefit to that product. So congratulations, Biden-Harris. You saved $6 billion on negotiating drugs. You lost $10 billion. You're minus 4 in the hole just if you toss on Paxlovid. Now let's toss on annual boosters. They want to give an annual booster to toddlers. All of Western Europe thinks that's misguided and thinks it's idiotic. They reserve boosters for people over the age of 65. Even there, we have to admit, we don't have randomized data. The administration has capitulated to Pfizer and Moderna. They're not even asking for randomized data. So we don't know if a booster benefits a nursing home patient in 2024, 2025. We'll never know the answer to these questions. Well, is certainly implausible and improbable is that year after year boosters benefit average, healthy, young people who've already had and recovered from COVID-19. So thanks for the savings on these drugs, but you're spending billions on just boosters. Okay, that's another way you're hemorrhaging money. The third point, forget about COVID. Let's look even broader. The administration is hemorrhaging money on all sorts of low credibility, low value drugs. Peter Marks at FDA just approved a gene therapy for Duchenne's muscular dystrophy against the approval, against the guidance of his own FDA reviewers. This is the same guy who pressured Marion Gruber and Phil Krauss to approve boosters for everyone such that they resigned, okay? So they're approving gene therapy. It's going to cost $2-3 million per person who gets it. No clear evidence kids are going to be better off as a result. They're approving scads of cancer drugs that just have no good evidence they improve outcomes for people. They've pushing to use MRD in the frontline setting in myeloma. It's an absolutely unvalidated endpoint. Go back and watch my video I presented at the FDA and made comments as to why that's a foolhardy decision. The administration is allowing aducanumab to come onto the U.S. market through the FDA and a series of other Alzheimer's drugs that the impact of which in the real world is absolutely uncertain. Some have side effects like brain edema. Some may improve how well you perform on crossword puzzle-like examinations. But do you actually live longer or live better? Are you more likely to live alone and well off in your house? Would that money be better spent on having a caregiver come to your house? We're just thinking in this narrow pharmaceutical company mindset, but I think if I had Alzheimer's, rather than spending $50,000 a year on some bullshit IV medication, I'd rather have someone come to my house and help me out a little bit if I have early Alzheimer's. This administration's not tackling that problem, okay? So you can negotiate drug prices all you want, but you are going to be spending more money. It is a Pyrrhic victory. It's a Band-Aid on a hemorrhage. They've actually lost more money just with COVID-19 policy than they ever gained from their drug price reduction. It's a foolish strategy. So they want applause that they're lowering the price of drugs. They're not. They're watching an account be bankrupted while they're trying to penny pinch on how much Starbucks lattes you have when you're buying a Lamborghini every day. I mean, it's just plain stupid. It's just plain bad policy. Now, one more thing. Universal healthcare. We're soon going to be talking about universal healthcare. And I think different people may have different moral intuitions as to whether or not a society ought to invest in universal healthcare for everybody. But let's put that aside. What no one can defend is that society should tax plumbers and janitors and bus drivers to pay for health care that doesn't work. Okay, nobody can defend the proposition. We should tax everyone. Take all this money and then pay for IVC filters that don't help people. Pay for ramucirumab, which doesn't help people. Pay for aducanumab, which doesn't help people. That's just transferring money from taxpayers to shareholders without any health care benefit. Entresto is really a beautiful vehicle to transfer money. It takes money from people and puts it in Novartis's pocket. But whether or not anyone actually lives longer with heart failure is unknown because all of the doses we're giving have not been studied against comparable doses of ACEs and ARBs. We've only studied one dose in a double drug and run-in period trial, which is an awful study, without running a confirmatory study. So what's my point is? My point is that we can't have universal health care in a just way if we're going to be spending hundreds of billions or even $1 trillion on things that just don't work. Cancer screening that doesn't work, Alzheimer's drugs that don't work. How can anyone on any side of the political spectrum justify taxing people to pay for medicine that doesn't work? If you want universal health care, you have to also want better evidence for therapeutics so that we can say we're going to tax people to pay for evidence-based, cost-effective care. And maybe there'll be a tier of insurance called evidence-based cost-effective insurance, where it's the things we know that work. And then a second tier of insurance, which is called horseshit medicine, bullshit things that some people think might work. And if you want that, you have to pay out of your own pocket. I mean, I just can't justify taxing people to pay for things that may or may not work. That is absolutely crazy. And I think that that's true whether or not you're the most ardent conservative or the most ardent liberal. And that's the problem that people will face going into, I think, the debates on healthcare policy. The Affordable Care Act still leaves many Americans underinsured and uninsured. It wasn't a panacea. And the problem people are going to face is that, well, how do you really cover everybody if you're also saying the coverage has to include every random piece of shit technology that no one has actually studied properly? You can't have Peter Marks at the FDA rubber stamping everything and saying we're going to pay for everything for everybody. You either have to have evidence to be the gatekeeper, or you have to say that, you know, we won't be able to afford this for everybody. There's one or the other. I think the most parsimonious answer is that we actually have better evidence on the way in and not approve things that don't work. I've thought that for a long time. It's the topic of my two books, Ending Medical Reversal and Malignant, which you should check out. Well, if you like this video, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, comment, and leave a message below. You know, you can save a penny, but you can spend $1.50. And that's really what they've done. They've really done that. This is really not going to do that much. It's not going to be a big deal. If they really want to cut spending, they should start demanding better evidence. And they should start with some of the foolish decisions they made, such as boosters and Paxlovid. So they're happy to spend money on things that don't work. And fine, but then don't ask me for applause by cutting spending a little bit on some drugs, some of which actually do something, some of which don't, probably Entresto. All right, until